Here's a radical idea for Mother's Day. What if there's something even better than the perfect mother? One time I said this to a client, maybe the best mother is a good enough mother. And I didn't get a good reaction. It's like, what? What do you mean? That's the good enough mother. That sounds like you're settling or you're slacking off. And I said to her, I get it. I need to say this differently. Let me put it this way. What if the good enough mother is actually the best mother because it allows you to not so much lower your standards, but raise your resilience? That's what the good enough mother is about. And I learned to actually translate this, say it even better. The way I say it now is, what if there's something even better than a perfect mother? Because there is. Hi, I'm Dr. Jan Anderson. I'm a psychologist and I work with high performing women and parents who often feel like on the outside they look like they've got it all together, but on the inside they're struggling. They can feel like it's falling apart. If you're a perfectionist, here's something you may not know, and it may be really hard to believe, but perfectionism actually undermines performance. It makes us overthink, try too hard, and actually do worse. There's even a name for this in psychology. It's called investment strategy. All that means is you feel like you've messed up. That makes you feel like you've got to try harder now to fix it. That actually increases the pressure, the self criticism, and you're actually more likely to flip out, fumble, freak out. It's like trying to thread a needle with shaking hands, and the more pressure you put on yourself, the shakier you get. Here's the truth: kids don't really need a perfect parent, they just need a present one. And by that I mean a parent who can bounce back from mistakes, a parent who can repair and reconnect after a tough moment. The idea of the good enough mother isn't new. I didn't come up with that. That actually comes from a British pediatrician, D.W. Winnicott, and his observation that moms striving for perfection, not only is it impossible, it's actually counterproductive. Here's what he noticed really seemed to help kids is allowing them to encounter in small, manageable chunks the inevitable snafus of life, little disappointments, small failures, and learning how to recover from them. That's what seemed to develop kids' emotional regulation, their ability to bounce back, their ability to recover from disappointment. So, in other words, that's resilience. And it doesn't come from perfection, it comes from encountering the imperfections of life and in yourself. Is that not interesting? It gives you a whole new spin on why it might be worth pursuing this good enough mother concept. And here's one of the ways that I did this with one of my favorite clients. So I asked this client, what's the worst possible thing that someone could say about you as a mother? And she actually came up with two things. One, that she didn't care, and number two, that she was selfish. What I did with that is say, okay, um, we tend to think in terms of extremes. You either are all one or all the other. And that's what usually gets us into trouble. So I said, can you see how if if you feel like you have to always be caring and never be selfish, that your only other option is to be a bad mom. You're selfish and uncaring. And she said, yes, I can sense that. I said, there is something in the middle. What if there was a third option, what I like to think of as a door number three? Do you get a sense of that? And she said, yes, because it's like we all sense that this being perfect, to always be caring, never be selfish, on some level we sense that it's just not possible, it's unattainable. But what's too bad about it is we feel like our only other option is to go to the other extreme. selfish and uncaring. So, what would this door number three look like? She said, I have no idea what it would look like. And I said, that's totally understandable. Let's work on that. So, here's what we did. Her definition of being a good mom, of being caring and not being selfish, kind of wrapped up in that too was that if she didn't do those things, if she was selfish and uncaring, she would come across as a mean dictator to her kids. But the problem was she was showing up for her appointments describing how her kids were kind of wild and unruly. They weren't doing well, and she wasn't doing well. It was driving her nuts. Okay, what would it look like to get into this door number three space? Well, I said, I'm going to propose a really radical idea. It will require a tiny amount, a subclinical homeopathic amount, you might say, of being slightly mean, slightly selfish, and slightly uncaring. And, she looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, all it means when you bring in a tiny droplet of those things, it just means you can set boundaries, you can have structure. And she quickly latched onto that. She said, I see what you mean. I'm kind of in the mode of thinking that we all have to agree or have to explain. And they're not good rules or boundaries, right now in our home. I said, yeah, that's what it would look like. That your ability to say, and actually she came up with these words of, it's not a democracy here. I am the authority. I am the one who sets the rules. And, she'd just been really pushing off that, but it just gave her some comfort to know that it's okay to bring in a tiny amount of that to actually make your home and your kids function better. So she played around with that. And to her surprise, it happened pretty quickly that she said, things are going better. The kids are behaving better, they're taking more responsibility, I'm doing better. But it was this kind of strange radical notion that you bring in a tiny amount of these things that you think are bad to actually get yourself in the middle and actually be your best. Again, it's just almost paradoxical the way it works. So let's be clear. When I say you're getting into this door number three space, it does not mean that good enough means that you're indifferent. It doesn't mean you're checked out. It doesn't mean you're lazy. What it does is allow you to show up and be more present, more emotionally present with yourself and with your kids. And that's what's so exciting about it, because perfectionism is based more on performance. Performance and that focus on it, it actually disconnects us from ourselves and from the people around us. When we're in this middle space here, we're actually more present. We actually build relationships in that space, and that's why I like it so much. Here's what I know about working with high performing, deeply devoted moms every day. You don't lack effort, you don't lack love. What you lack is permission to let go of the myth of the perfect mother and allow yourself to get into this space where you show up and you're real. It works so much better, it feels so much better. And yet it is a little complicated. This isn't something you have to figure out on your own. If anything in this video resonated with you and you would like to explore this further, I would love to talk with you. Stay tuned. Here's how you can book a consultation.